A morning mist enveloped the Hudson Valley in 1888, hovering over the New York countryside like a veil that suspended time. Within the majestic Blackwood Manor, the atmosphere was one of fervent celebration for all but one. In the great hall, burgundy velvet curtains parted for a muted light, revealing the imposing 6-foot family portrait. There, the 3 Blackwood daughters posed side by side. Clara, the youngest, radiated sweetness in a shimmering peach gown. At the center, Genevieve displayed a royal blue that accentuated her haughty gaze. Yet, at the very edge, almost fused with the shadows of the dark background, Eleanor appeared more a lady's companion than a sister, her deep unadorned gown and her golden hair in an austere chignon. Her eyes, downcast, seemed to wish themselves erased from the canvas. This was no accident. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, the matriarch, had so decreed. She observed the artwork in silence as the murmur of Genevieve's wedding filled the hall. Rushed footsteps, forced laughter from aunt's carriage bells, all echoed distantly for Eleanor. At 39, Eleanor had never been betrothed. To the world, she was the one who remained, the prudent one, she who had not dared to seek advantageous marriages, residing under her mother's roof out of respect. Everyone knew, and she knew better. It was pure imposition, without disguise. Eleanor, my dear, pray do not tarry so. The seamstress requires to fit Clara's bodice, and you are the only one who can truly calm her, Mrs. Victoria Blackwood said, her voice sharp with impatience, entering the hall, her fan fluttering in agitation. Eleanor, instead of her usual submission, lifted her chin, her gaze cold, fixed on her mother. Interesting, she retorted, her voice low, yet keen as ice. The only one among your daughters to possess a voice, and which, for convenience, you still permit yourself to hear. A heavy silence descended, a clash of wills, a rare and tense rebellion. After the silent confrontation, Eleanor withdrew, her steps like shadows along the carpeted corridors. Her attire for the day, a simple ivory linen dress, devoid of sparkle or jewels, with puffed sleeves and mother-of-pearl buttons. The modesty, her chosen armor, only underscored the newly displayed hauteur. In Clara's room, the 22-year-old's eyes fixed on her reflection, Eleanor, with habitual patience, supported her, encouraging her to breathe as the bodice was adjusted. Clara prattled on about her future husband, a baron of lands, but devoid of intellect. Eleanor smiled faintly in silence, a smile not of envy, but of bitter understanding. Then she retreated to her sanctuary. The library. Among philosophy and history she found breath. She touched worn spines, devoured forgotten authors, and her mind soared through unattainable worlds. In that silent refuge, she dreamt not of balls or alliances. She aspired to the freedom of a woman heard, considered, and she knew with a painful certainty that such a dream would never fit where there was only space for status, airs, and appearances. As evening drew in and Mr. Percival Beaumont's carriage arrived for Genevieve Blackwood, the manor erupted in farewells. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood wept. Clara Blackwood waved her handkerchief. The servants watched, keen with excitement. Eleanor, however, remained a step behind, a silent observer. Far off, Sebastian Vance, newly returned from his travels, observed. No one knew his purpose nor whom he had come to see again. For a fleeting instant, his gaze met Eleanor's at the top of the grand staircase. An invisible tremor hung in the air, unnoticed by both. Behind her, the Blackwood family portrait still dried, the pale light accentuating the shadow that enveloped her. Time seemed intent on silencing the soul-discerning mind in the house. But time, however relentless, cannot extinguish hidden seeds. Eleanor unknowingly was poised to blossom. Hudson Valley, New York, autumn of 1888. The persistent mist still clung to the fields when the black carriage broke through the iron gates of Vance Hall. The crunch of wheels on the gravel road sounded like a harbinger, and the servants, bowed in deference or dread, watched the return. After 7 years of absence, Sebastian Vance returned to the Hudson Valley, a walking enigma. He descended from the vehicle with the glacial elegance that had made him feared in diplomatic circles. Tall, imposing, he wore a charcoal wool overcoat buttoned to the collar. His reddish hair, now darker and restrained by time, was impeccably groomed. His beard, rigorously trimmed, underscored an inflexible jawline. His eyes, an almost metallic grey, scoured the surroundings without emotion, devoid of any trace of longing. His childhood mansion, once vibrant, was now a faded echo. His footsteps echoed through the hall, beneath the silent gaze of ancestral portraits. Sebastian had not returned for nostalgia. He had come for a duty, a settling of accounts. He had come to confront ghosts, a betrayal, the shadow of a lost brother, and to face the surname he could never erase, Blackwood. Meanwhile, across the Hudson Valley, within a stately residence of austere lines, Eleanor Blackwood adjusted lilies in the library when her sister Daisy's shrill voice startled her. "The Duke has returned!" Daisy exclaimed, bursting in like a gale, her face flushed with excitement. "They say he was seen on the main road this morning. Mama has already ordered all the candelabras polished. You ought to dress yourself, Eleanor." The elder woman slowly raised her eyes, her body still inclined over the flowers. The remark, once painful, now merely slipped past, not from insensitivity, but from a shield of dignity forged over time. Her presence, always the last noticed, was ironically the pillar of the family's fragile harmony. "The Duke has not come to visit us," she responded, her voice calm, like one who had witnessed countless returns and dismissals. "If he has come, it is for politics, to meet with the gentlemen of Congress. Nothing that concerns me." Yet fate had other designs. That very afternoon, the Vance family carriage stopped before Blackwood Manor. The announcement caused a controlled flurry. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, pomp itself personified, eagerly ordered the finest attire for her daughters. Maids hurried, drawing rooms were aired. Eleanor, however, refused to partake in such hysteria. Ignoring her mother's expectations, she chose a sober petroleum blue velvet gown, with delicate embroidery on the sleeves and a collar fastened by a sapphire cameo. Her hair, styled in an elegant side coiffure with interwoven braids and a discreet blue satin ornament, culminated in an image of restraint and serene beauty, a figure of silent rebellion, never acknowledged as such. The air seemed to freeze the moment Sebastian Vance stepped into the manor, his secretary in tow. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, the very embodiment of grandeur, bowed in an exaggerated arc, pulling her daughters forward for graceful introductions. But the Duke remained a sphinx, his metallic grey eyes sweeping the hall of silent statues, until he found her. Eleanor Blackwood stood apart from the hearth, her hands clasped before her body. It was the posture of one who had embraced invisibility, yet beneath her quietude, a silent resilience pulsed. In that instant, Sebastian faltered. He did not recognize her immediately. The young woman of braids and books had given way to a woman, a profound presence. Yet something in her eyes deeply unsettled him, echoing the wound of betrayal and the loss of his brother that still haunted him. "Miss Blackwood," he uttered, his voice an intriguing blend of surprise and formality. "Indeed," she replied, with a faint, almost imperceptible inclination of her head. The silence between them stretched, heavy. Daisy, sensing the tension, broke it with a nervous titter. "Eleanor is our greatest domestic treasure. Never married, can you imagine? Mama often says it would be such a waste to lose someone so useful." The phrase, veiled in silk, cut the air like a razor. Sebastian offered no reply, yet the subtle furrow of his brow betrayed the impact. He observed her again. There was no visible bitterness, no open defiance, only a disquieting calm, like the untroubled surface of a lake poised on the brink of a storm. The visit proceeded with strained conversation and the rituals of tea. Sebastian maintained the protocol, yet his gaze stubbornly returned to Eleanor. It was not desire that compelled him, but something more intricate, a faded memory, an ancient disquiet that refused to be ignored. As the afternoon waned in his farewell, he offered a brief bow to Mrs. Blackwood, then turned to Eleanor. "Perhaps we shall meet again soon," he murmured, almost a thought spoken aloud. She offered a faint smile, but what her eyes conveyed was far deeper. No hope, no expectation, only the silent question. Why now? At the door, just beyond the gaze of others, Sebastian paused. He looked to the graying sky above the Hudson Valley, New York. "She is different, isn't she?" he whispered to his secretary. "Miss Blackwood?" "Quite so, sir. But I believe she always has been. Only no one truly looked." Sebastian offered no reply. He ascended into the carriage with the unsettling sensation that on this day the past had opened a door he had not expected. On the other side, in the drawing room, Eleanor remained standing before the unlit fireplace, her eyes fixed on the void as if, at last, the silence that enveloped her had begun to express more than all the words she had never uttered. Autumn deepened over the Hudson Valley. Something dormant for years at last stirred. Night had fallen upon the region like a cloak of navy velvet, dappled by the soft glow of candles and chandeliers. Blackwood Manor, illuminated for the dinner in honor of Sebastian Vance, teemed with tense smiles, forced laughter and sharp remarks, veiled by wine glasses and fine china. Eleanor was seated at the far end of the long oak table, strategically positioned, as always, away from the din. Her lavender-grey gown, discreet yet elegantly cut, outlined the grace of her shoulders and waist. Her coiffure, a double-braided chignon adorned with small pearls, revealed her pale, firm nape. She was a perfect composition, like a valuable painting forgotten in an exhibition hallway, beautiful yet invisible. Her sisters, Daisy and Alice, close to the guest of honor, monopolized Sebastian's attention. They smiled with calculated exaggeration, laughed too loudly, vying for his every glance. Alice, the youngest and most impulsive, dared a cutting jest that reverberated like a dagger through the room, fracturing the already tenuous atmosphere. "Eleanor still believes books can replace a husband," her sweet, sharp voice echoed. The raised glass sealed the toast, and the contained laughter from the table spread almost unanimous. But Sebastian Vance did not join in. Eleanor, for her part, merely smiled. It was a serene smile. As she brought the glass to her lips, the wine strangely bitter, her expression remained untouched, yet within, something constricted. It was not pain, but a profound weariness, cultivated over decades of calculated invisibility. Sebastian, who until then had displayed the haughty composure of a man forged by power and war, noticed her. He shifted his gaze, a new attention, almost uncomfortable. What he perceived was not the faded figure many disdained as a social burden. He discerned a silent dignity, without pleas for attention, without lowering herself to provocations. There, an undeniable presence resided. At the dinner's close, as the guests dispersed to the music room or the dew-scented gardens, Eleanor rose. With grace, she walked alone to the library. She yearned for air, for silence, for herself. The sanctuary smelled of leather, ancient wood, and memories that soothed her. She sat by the window among volumes familiar since childhood and released a soft sigh. She sought to expel not merely the air, but the echoes of the veiled humiliation carefully borne. It was then that firm, controlled footsteps broke the stillness. The door creaked discreetly. Sebastian Vance appeared. Surprised, she raised her eyes. "Forgive me for encroaching upon your sanctuary, Eleanor," he said, maintaining a respectful distance. "I was unaware anyone was here." Eleanor replied with a half-smile. "It is the only place where people need not pretend to be what they are not." Sebastian Vance hesitated, pondering each word. "How you seem quite different from what I recalled." Eleanor Blackwood inclined her head, her gaze steady upon his. "Perhaps because you have truly perceived me for the first time this evening, Mr. Vance." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was dense, charged with an almost palpable electricity. He drew a little closer, observing Eleanor's fine features in the dancing firelight. Her eyes, a hazel, almost amber gold, were calm, yes, but held unfathomable depths, secrets he felt he might never decipher. "I do not recall seeing you at the Newport seasons," he commented, as if testing the waters. "I am not frequently invited, and when I am, I prefer the company of books. Or perhaps they prefer mine," Eleanor retorted, her tone light yet unyielding. "Have you always been so reserved?" She raised her eyebrows. "Reserved is the word they employ when they fail to decipher silence, Mr. Vance, but I am not reserved. I merely learned to withhold my presence where it is unwelcome." Sebastian did not reply immediately. He leaned against a bookshelf, crossing his arms. He seemed disconcerted, not by offense, but by a sensation that surprised him profoundly. Eleanor did not yield, did not seek to please him, did not fear him, and, curiously, this drew him, compelling him to remain. "Do you know what else surprised me this evening?" he inquired after a moment. She waited. "The manner in which you bore your sister's slights without reaction, without faltering in composure," Eleanor replied softly. "Because I have learned that a woman's worth resides not in what she answers, but in what she chooses to leave unsaid." Sebastian regarded her with redoubled intensity. The firelight cast warm shadows upon her countenance, accentuating the mature contours, that serene beauty ignored for countless years. She rose, adjusted her gown, and walked towards the door, ready to conclude this unexpected chapter. But before departing, she turned. Her eyes met his. "Do not trouble yourself, Mr. Vance. Silence is my finest armor." And she exited, leaving Sebastian solitary amidst books and embers. But something within him had been truly kindled, and it was not the hearth. The frigid silence of the night seemed to engulf the corridors of the ancient Blackwood Manor, nestled in the heart of the Hudson Valley, New York. The pale, furtive moonlight cast phantasmal shadows upon faded tapestries. All slept, save the books, and Eleanor. In her eyes a spark of quiet defiance. Wearing a blue-gray wool dressing gown over her linen nightdress, she glided barefoot across the second-floor carpets. The lantern she held flickered with each step. Her hair, secured in a hurried braid at the nape, betrayed her urgency. An irresistible restlessness impelled her. Only printed words and ancient ideas held true meaning, far more than the vacuous conversations of afternoon teas. The library door yielded to her touch. The velvety aroma of aged leather, paper, and polished wood enveloped her like a familiar, silent embrace. She moved forward, traversing distant rows with the natural ease of one who had found refuge there her entire life. "Political philosophy," she murmured, her fingers tracing the spines. Edmund Burke, or perhaps Rousseau. So absorbed, she did not hear the faint creak of the door behind her. "Awaiting a revolution, Miss Blackwood." The masculine voice, deep and subtly sarcastic, shattered the silence like a stone cast into a placid lake. Sebastian Vance, the influential magnate, leaned against the doorframe. Coatless, his white shirt slightly open at the collar, revealed the severity of his bearing. His auburn hair, disheveled, suggested he too was a prisoner of the night. Eleanor composed herself with a slight nod. "Mr. Vance," she said, "I did not anticipate company in this wing of the house at such an hour." "Nor did I, Eleanor. But it seems sleeplessness unites us, or perhaps deeper disquiet, scars that time insists upon not erasing." He walked slowly to the center of the room. Eleanor did not respond immediately, turning to the shelf to retrieve an ancient volume. "Restless thoughts deserve good interlocutors," she whispered. "Yet books do not judge, nor interrupt, nor distort our intentions." Sebastian approached, now but a few paces away. "Always the most eloquent of your sisters. I had not recalled this." She closed the book delicately, holding it against her chest, avoiding his gaze. "That is because you never truly paid heed." He paused. Silence returned, laden with something neither had known how to name until now. "Indeed, you are entirely right. I was blind, arrogant perhaps, or perhaps merely too broken to truly see," he said at last, with a frankness that made her lift her gaze. "And now?" Eleanor questioned, with a firmness that surprised even herself. "Has the magnate returned to mend past wrongs, or merely for diplomatic duty?" Sebastian offered a faint smile, yet did not respond. His eyes scrutinized her with contained intensity, as if seeking to decipher what had shifted within the young woman who once seemed invisible to him. "7 years ago, I would never have imagined finding you here alone, seeking authors deemed unsuitable for well-bred ladies," he said, his hand touching one of the shelves. "And 7 years ago, I still believed that writing might be possible." "Write?" He raised his brows, surprised. "Yes," she answered with a sigh. "Since girlhood I have dreamed of publishing essays, perhaps a book. But I understood early that without an influential husband or relevant surname, a woman would always be silenced, especially if she dared to opine on politics or philosophy." Sebastian drew a step closer. The lamp's flame now lit part of his face, drawing shadows across his angular, severe features. "And you never considered using a pseudonym? To what end? To speak my mind without being stoned with scorn?" She laughed bitterly. "Perhaps, but even then no one would know it was I." Her voice, without substance or history, echoed. Sebastian observed her silently. For the first time since his arrival, he saw not Eleanor, the muted sister, but a woman who in her quietude had carved her own strength against indifference. "Perhaps it is time for that to change," he whispered, his voice low. "The world, or at least a part of it, is changing." "The world changes only for men, Duke," she responded. Sebastian extended a hand impulsively, nearly touching hers, but hesitated. There, before the shelf, hands almost united, millimeters and centuries of convention held them apart. An instant warmth lingered. Eleanor recoiled slightly, breaking the spell. "It is late, I must retire," she murmured. "Of course, Ian," he replied, taking a respectful step back. She walked to the door without looking, but upon crossing the threshold, turned for an instant. "Thank you for not laughing at my dream." Sebastian nodded in silence. At her chamber's threshold, Eleanor was intercepted. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood awaited, her countenance frigid. "Conversations in the library with a Vance, that is hardly befitting your station." Eleanor, however, did not retreat. Her voice, once merely an echo, gained firmness. "Mother, my dream is not a scandal. It is my voice, and it deserves to be heard." A flicker of shock glinted in Mrs. Victoria's eyes, a brief truce before such unexpected resolve. The following morning, Blackwood Manor in the Hudson Valley was consumed by whispers. Maids exchanged hushed words, glances intersected, and the suppressed giggles of Eleanor's sisters permeated the tea room. "The forgotten sister was observed in the library last night with Mr. Vance," Genevieve declared, a cruel glint in her eyes, "evidently dazzling him with Rousseau." "Most likely," Daisy scoffed, her laughter sharp. Eleanor maintained an unwavering composure. She wore a sober grayish lavender ensemble, its long sleeves and mother-of-pearl buttons lending her an air of untouchable elegance. Her hair, a double-braided chignon, further accentuated this dignity. She offered no retort to any provocation. Yet, when her path crossed Sebastian's in the winter garden, their gazes met, a fleeting yet profound connection. Within that shared moment resided an disquiet, an unasked question, an unspoken memory. Perhaps it was the nascent stirrings of something they could not yet name, but which already held weight in their shared silences. For sometimes, what commences with a book culminates in a quiet revolution. The following day, the garrulous whispers in the drawing rooms yielded to a trenchant silence. Servants exchanged glances, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension in their eyes, as if the clinking of china might awaken an unwelcome presence. The manor itself seemed to exhale an invisible tension, its venerable walls guarding the unspoken secret of what was rumored to have transpired. Sebastian traversed the corridors like a man enduring a silent judgment. Each step resonated with a ponderous weight. The notion from the preceding night now tormented him. To perform what was proper, but ultimately what truly constituted rectitude. The image of Eleanor, championing her aspirations with a conviction and disarming serenity, continued to haunt him. She had touched him without physical contact, reaching a part he believed long extinguished, a profound disquiet. It was not the ardent desire that consumes, but rather an erosion of his pride, born of admiration, a sentiment he had thought irrevocably lost, along with his faith in loyalty, after the betrayal that had claimed his brother. It was thus, with hands trembling within the coat sleeves, that he entered the winter garden. Eleanor was seated, absorbed in a worn, leather-bound volume. Light filtered through the glass panes, casting gentle patterns upon the stone floor. She wore a severe yet elegant dark green gown, its long laced sleeves a stark contrast to her fair skin. Her hair, styled in a double-braided chignon, was adorned with a single silver clasp. "Miss Blackwood," he began, his voice steadier than his internal disquiet, "I must speak with you in candor." She raised her eyes slowly, marking her page with a small lace handkerchief. She offered neither a smile nor a flicker of surprise. "Indeed, Mr. Vance." Sebastian inhaled deeply, feeling the urge to sit, but remained standing. "I am aware of the rumors that have circulated since yesterday. They are patently infamous, and I deeply regret that you have been exposed to such judgment through my inadvertence." She inclined her head ever so slightly, offering no reply. "I propose that we marry," Sebastian Vance declared, his voice cutting with the rigidity of a seasoned commander. Eleanor met his gaze. No surprise stirred, no flush touched her cheeks. Only a contemplative silence, which seemed to stretch beyond the confines of the room. "I confess I do not quite comprehend, Mr. Vance," she replied, the serenity in her voice almost a veiled defiance. "I am proposing a marriage, not solely for scandal," he half lied, the truth far more intricate than he would admit, "but for honor. What transpired in your library was not unseemly, yet it bore an intimacy. And here, in the Hudson Valley, that suffices to compromise a lady's reputation." Eleanor rose, her movements rehearsed with a contained grace, her amber-green eyes strangely pellucid. "Your benevolence offers, then, reparation for that which remained unfulfilled?" The query hung suspended. "A marriage as compensation," Sebastian insisted, impatience gnawing at him as he observed her impassivity. "A gesture of respect." "Or perhaps of relief," she completed softly, her tone almost imperceptible yet potent enough to silence any other voice. "To maintain the orderly facade of your household." Sebastian flushed. Never before had he been so directly confronted, least of all by a woman who until this moment had existed on the periphery, almost invisible. She walked to the window, her hands clasped over her middle. She seemed to converse with her own reflection in the glass as she spoke. "I have grown amidst these walls as a shadow. My presence was acknowledged only when silence proved vital, or a sagacious response urgent. Never for affection, never for protection, nor yet for justice." She then turned, a peculiar light kindling in her eyes. It was not fury, but a bitter clarity. "I have indeed dreamt of a marriage, one of love, of true partnership, of the profound sensation of being seen truly as a woman. But if the desire is merely for a societal shield to quell whispers, then I must refuse. I do not accept sentimental alms." Her words echoed with the force of an irrevocable decree. Sebastian attempted a reply, but his voice failed him. Something within him, once so unyielding, began to yield, to fracture. She approached him, a faint yet genuine smile gracing her lips. "I thank you for your concern. I hope that one day you will find someone who desires you for who you are, not for what you must atone." Her footsteps, light, almost ethereal, guided her from the room. Sebastian remained motionless, alone before the window, his hand outstretched into the void as if attempting to grasp that which had already slipped away. Hours later, traversing the corridors, Eleanor Blackwood carried herself with a transfigured bearing. The same dark green gown, once a mere garment, now enveloped her like silent armor. Her expression was serene, her gaze liberated. In that woman, whom so many had deemed forgotten, now resided the unyielding strength of one who no longer feared loss, having faced abandonment and emerged. Servants fell silent at her passing. Sisters whispered from a distance. For the first time, she neither bowed nor averted her eyes, nor sought justifications. She simply advanced, a lady who, devoid of alliances or titles, began to unveil her own inherent royalty. Meanwhile, in his library, Sebastian clutched the book Eleanor had leafed through. Yet he dared not read it. Each page, a relentless mirror to his pride, reminded him of the loss of something he had barely had time to truly desire. The foyer of Mr. Percival Beaumont's opulent summer palatial estate in Newport, Rhode Island, radiated gold and mirrors. The imposing walls reflected the soft light of crystal chandeliers bathing the society, assembled there in an almost ethereal splendor. Rehearsed smiles, discreetly fluttering fans, conversations interrupted by silent judgments. There was a fierce beauty to those evenings, as if beneath the polished veneer of every greeting, a sharp blade lay in wait. Eleanor emerged alone. Her entrance was no mere occurrence, but a thunderclap in a serene sky shattering the general murmur. Her Bordeaux gown, heavy satin and sober cut, sculpted her slender figure with the dignity of a forgotten work of art. It was the hue of aged wine, of blood held steadfast. The high collar and pearl buttons deliberately contrasted with the absence of a décolletage, a silent defiance, demanding the room see her without diversion. No jewels adorned her neck, only her hair gathered in an austere chignon, highlighted by a discreet amber brooch, a symbol. She did not require notice, but rather remembrance. All saw her. Almost none offered a greeting. In the corners of the salon, murmurs stirred like portents. Eleanor Blackwood, unescorted, transgressed the rules. Mad or calculating, her arrival was a challenge to the established order. Eleanor walked with the dignity of one treading upon ruins, respectful yet undaunted. She knew the murmurs, and also what lay hidden beneath them. Each step reverberated the force of a wounded soul, yet one that had learned never to bleed in public. Her very presence was, in itself, an act of rebellion. Sebastian Vance, leaning against an archway that led to the conservatory, personified a rigid discipline. His black velvet coat, with its satin lapels and a white silk handkerchief folded precisely in his pocket, underscored this defensive stance. He spoke to Mr. Beaumont of properties in the Hudson Valley, but his mind had already begun its drift. Upon seeing her, Sebastian Vance froze. She was the same woman from that evening in the library, yet now she exuded a blend of defiance, sobriety, and a beauty that required no adornment. Nothing about her suggested vulgarity, rather there was something far more formidable: dignity. Sebastian felt the echo of her words, a keen arrow to his heart, and the instinct to reach for her. But then, the whispers of his sisters invaded his mind. She came to provoke. Will she yield to shame? Will she stain our name? Those voices were part of a larger trauma, an ancient wound of betrayal, and the grievous loss of his brother, chaining him to the image of an unyielding and formidable man. Eleanor had no need to seek him out. She felt the weight of Sebastian's gaze upon her, like an inevitable sun, distant, yet destined soon to reach her. The violins wept a waltz in the ballroom. Glasses chimed. Ladies whirled in hurried arms, while feigned laughter masked the fissures in their illusory fortunes. The charade continued. Suddenly, with a gesture of unthinkable audacity, Sebastian crossed the ballroom. Every gaze followed him, as if he bore a banner of challenge. He passed duchesses, magistrates, debutantes, his eyes steady, unwavering. Stopping before Eleanor, he bowed, not with his usual coolness, but with the respect of one who recognized a kindred spirit. He extended his hand. "Might I have this dance?" Time in the ballroom held its breath. Eleanor hesitated, if only for an instant. An internal war between wounded pride and long-silenced yearning raged within her. Yet she would not yield first, not out of vanity, but from a deeper sense of power. "Yes, Mr. Vance," she replied, a faint smile playing upon her lips, but only one. Thus the most fraught waltz of the season commenced. Their steps were perfectly synchronized, but their gazes, a contained storm devoid of flirtation, were disconcerting. Sebastian seemed to wage a battle not merely against societal judgment, but within himself, against the chains that bound him to the past. Eleanor, though her fingers trembled subtly beneath her lace gloves, held her eyes serene. The proximity was unbearable, his scent, lavender and tobacco, hers, jasmine and silence. As the music faded, before Sebastian could utter a word, a voice cut through the air. "How interesting. The forgotten sister now dances with magnates." It was Mrs. Evangeline Albright, a woman nearing 60, known for her sharp tongue and for having been passed over by 3 of society's most eligible bachelors. Beside her unmarried daughters, Mrs. Albright exuded not only the venom of the elite, but the bitterness of one never truly chosen. The murmurs resumed, a buzzing swarm. Sebastian stepped forward, prepared to wield the authority of his standing and silence the affront. But Eleanor, with a firm gesture, stayed him. She turned to Mrs. Albright, her queenly gaze unassailable. "You are correct," Eleanor stated, her voice devoid of even a tremor. I am Eleanor Blackwood, the forgotten sister, the one not tutored for salons, nor adorned for balls. Yet observe, I am still here, and whether I dance with a man of influence or a gardener, it is not for social assent. I dance only when I wish, and today I wished. Mrs. Evangeline Albright paled, her fan trembling in her hand, her fury thinly veiled. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, my own mother, attempted to intervene with a furious whisper, but Eleanor would not be silenced. "Mother," she pronounced, her cutting voice echoing, "I am no longer a shadow in your house. I am no error of compassion. I am a woman. And this courage you now witness, it is mine and it always has been." A sepulchral silence descended. Not even the musicians dared resume the melody. Sebastian Vance observed Eleanor, a new world dawning in his eyes. In that instant of defiance, she did not curtsy, did not offer thanks. She simply turned her back, seeking the side veranda, where the night air at last seemed lighter. The heavens themselves bore witness to her triumph. That night, Eleanor needed no alliances, no promises, no protection. She was seen, not by those who merely glanced, but by those who finally perceived her essence. Far from the incessant hum of New York City and the Hudson Valley, the countryside breathed a heavy silence. The vast and solemn Vance Hall lay enveloped by an autumn fog that seemed eternized since the last storm. Dry leaves danced on the wind, like ghosts of a summer lost, scattering across the stone paths, accumulating at the base of marble columns. It was as if time had ceased there, but no, time had not ceased. It was exacting a profound price. Sebastian Vance, the magnate, gazed into the oak mirror in his parents' chamber. The impeccable image did not convince him. His eyes betrayed a weariness beyond sleepless nights, the burden of years ill-lived. The trimmed beard barely concealed deep marks, wounds upon the soul. 2 months since the scandal at Beaumont Manor, Sebastian had not returned to New York City. Vance Hall, its servants, the Hudson Valley fields, everything suffocated him. Each corridor a tunnel to the past. He recalled his brother's laughter, the shattered plans, the day of the accident, and worse, the bitter truth, the betrayal of the woman he loved, who had not only deceived him, but had taken with her the joy his brother represented. In the library, beneath shelves that kissed the ceiling, Sebastian held the yellowed envelope, seal broken. Eleanor's note, discreet, few words yet cutting in their depth. "There is something worse than being invisible," he read. "It is to be seen as a burden, a debt, or a duty. If you ever wish to know me, read the last page of my journal. Do not come as a magnate. Come as a man." He had read the words countless times, but that morning, reopening it, he noticed a small folded paper hidden. Trembling hands unfolded it. A draft, a passage from the book Eleanor dreamed of writing, her handwriting firm. She did not beg for love, only that her existence not be a burden, and when love came, she did not recognize it, disguised as obligation. Sebastian put down the note. He rose, walking to the window. Outside, fields steeped in mist. The stable buzzed, but everything seemed purposeless. What value held a legacy without truth, without soul? He rested his forehead against the cold pane. For the first time in years, Sebastian wept. Silent tears, like the sorrows carried for so long. The weeping of a man who finally saw himself, stripped of titles, conventions, defenses. The man behind the magnate. For weeks, Sebastian had tried to convince himself that Eleanor was merely another stubborn young woman, naive in her pride. But what tortured him was precisely her unyielding dignity. It was not her beauty that had unsettled him, though Eleanor was indeed captivating. It was her firmness, her freedom, her refusal to accept crumbs of affection as if they were gold. She did not plead. She demanded to be seen. The night he had asked her to marry him, Sebastian had expected to resolve everything with a cold gesture of reparation. Yet Eleanor disarmed him with a serene smile and a refusal that spoke more than 1,000 words. Now he understood. She did not want a title. She wished to be chosen, loved unconditionally. He descended Vance Hall's grand staircase with heavy, resolute steps, oblivious to the watchful staff. He entered his father's rarely visited study. The air, undisturbed, was redolent with dark wood, dense draperies, and the sweet, lingering scent of old books and pipe tobacco. On the wall, a family portrait from before tragedy claimed his brother and fractured his spirit, before betrayal walled him off. His brother smiled. A younger Sebastian, beside him, strove to appear too serious for his tender years. There he made his decision. Not as magnate would he approach her. He would go as Sebastian, devoid of pomp, carriage, or announcement, bearing only truth in his gaze. He opened a drawer, retrieving an old locket, his mother's gift. Lady Vance had always told him, "Love, my son, demands courage to show who we are when unseen." He had not understood. Until now. He had a horse saddled, dismissing staff briefly. He would be away for days. None dared ask his route, but his face no longer held years of isolation. A spark, a desire for reparation, a man who at last knew his true self. As he rode dusty Hudson Valley roads toward the village, the wind cut his face, unheeded. Each hoofbeat carried him further from a self he no longer wished to bear. He knew not if Eleanor would be there, nor if she would receive him. For the first time, the outcome mattered not. It was the intention, the gesture, to reach her, not with promises or alliances, but with an open soul. Upon a hill, Sebastian halted his horse, contemplating the horizon. The sky, gilded with sparse clouds, showed a timid setting sun. Within him, a silent prayer formed, not for love, but for forgiveness. For he now knew. The only woman who never judged him was the sole one brave enough to see past his armor. He was willing to shed it at any cost. Lillian Vance's wedding morning dawned golden, cloudless, as if heavens blessed the youngest sister's union with a prominent gentleman, enveloped in fortune, estates, and legacy. Vance Hall's columns wore fresh flower garlands. Peonies mingled their scent with dried lavender, hung discreetly in window sprigs. Soft music played, hushed laughter rose. A flurry of white lace, light veils, and expectant gazes filled the air. Eleanor arrived alone, as had become her custom. She still felt the echo of her mother, Mrs. Victoria Blackwood's voice, the fury in her eyes when Eleanor, with unyielding composure, refused the imposed marriage arrangement. "You dishonor our house, Eleanor. Marriages are agreements, not fairy tales." But Eleanor had retorted, her voice firm, "I would rather dishonor a title than to dishonor myself, Mother." That recent confrontation still fortified her resolve. The gown she had chosen was a deep petroleum blue, with discreet black lace on the high bodice and long fitted sleeves. Her simply coiffed hair contrasted starkly with the ostentation of the other ladies, who paraded like peacocks. She wore no jewels, save for a small brooch inherited from her mother pinned to her shoulder. She did not wish to draw attention, yet it was futile. Wherever she stood, her silence commanded more notice than the boisterous smiles of the others. The ceremony had already begun. The groom, standing beside the clergyman, maintained an impassive demeanor. Lillian, radiant and tense, clutched her bouquet. The sisters exchanged glances, uncertain of Eleanor. Some ladies whispered, admiring her audacity. Others ignored her. Suddenly, a murmur rippled through the local church in the Hudson Valley. The door opened with ceremonial slowness. A man emerged, tall, imposing, dressed in black, like night itself. The formidable Sebastian Vance strode down the central aisle, his gaze bypassing the altar. His eyes sought only one face, and finding her in the penultimate pew, his steps faltered. Eleanor. Eleanor did not move. Yet her gaze, fixed upon him, went beyond astonishment, revealing a perilous blend of tenderness and sorrow that disarmed him. The clergyman hesitated, and the murmurs swelled. Sebastian Vance advanced a few more steps. The entire congregation followed him with their eyes. The groom, visibly constrained, adjusted his collar. Lillian, static, hardly knew whether to smile or weep. And then, Sebastian stopped and did the unthinkable. He knelt in the center of the aisle upon the carpet leading to the altar. Sebastian Vance, feared and respected, bent one knee to the ground, not as a coerced proposal, but as one surrendering his very armor. His eyes did not stray from hers. "Miss Eleanor Blackwood," he declared, his voice grave and embargada, resonating clear as contained thunder. "I come not as a magnate, nor heir to vast holdings, nor as the man imprisoned by the wounds of a past I insisted on bearing. I come as Sebastian, simply that. The man who dared to live but half a life, who learned too late. That courage is not merely to wield the sword, but to lower it before one who holds up mirrors to our soul. The church plunged into absolute silence. I do not ask for your hand as a prize, nor do I kneel out of pride. I kneel because among all voices yours was the only one that never judged me, the only one that dared to challenge me without wounding, the only one that truly saw me before I knew who I was. Eleanor's sisters, including young Lydia, exchanged glances of confusion and profound emotion. Lydia, the youngest, wept softly. Lillian at the altar smiled amidst surprise and profound relief, sensing the vastness of that singular moment. Eleanor, however, remained motionless. Her eyes, now moist, did not waver. Then she rose, and with a newfound steadfastness, walked toward Sebastian. Every breath in the room seemed to hold. When she stood before him, she did not extend her hand. Instead, she asked, her voice clear, "Sebastian, are you ready to hear what you never dared to listen to?" He did not hesitate. "Yes." Eleanor took a deep breath. Her eyes sparked, not with anger, but with a passion kindled over years, a serene, profound flame. "Then, listen," she began, with the strength of one who had refused to break. "I too have known fear. I too bore shame. I too hid behind brittle words, behind sarcasm and within the pages of books. But I, Sebastian, I awaited you with hope, yet with unyielding dignity, for I deserve no less than a man made whole. And if you stand here now, it is because you have arrived whole." The silence erupted into a cascade of soft murmurs, hands clasped, eyes welled with tears. Sebastian rose, not with haste, but with a profound reverence. For the first time they stood as equals, in stature and in offering. He held her hand without urgency. She allowed it. Together, standing tall, they turned toward the altar, where Lillian watched them with a smile that was half sob, half blessing. There was no kiss at the altar, only a gaze, a touch, a promise. Silent, yet the most powerful of all. In that moment, their souls intertwined. Love, once a secret held within unpublished pages, now blossomed there real for all to witness. Discreet, such had been Eleanor's wish, and so it transpired. No grand orchestras or processions of illustrious guests, only a formal garden at Blackwood Manor in the Hudson Valley on a spring afternoon, cradled by the soft whisper of the wind through the ancestral treetops of the estate. The blossoms, in their full splendor, seemed to have unfurled to celebrate the improbable, the love of a woman no one had dared to await, and of a man who had learned to bide his time. Eleanor advanced slowly down the aisle, bordered by white camellias. Her ivory gown, meticulously hand-embroidered, possessed an elegant sobriety. Its fitted sleeves accentuated the grace of her movements. The short veil, adorned with delicate flowers in her fair hair, illuminated her countenance. Each step was an affirmation, an echo of the rebellion against Mrs. Victoria's decree of marry for convenience. No, this was not an imposed fairy tale. It was her redemption, her singular choice. Sebastian saw her, and the burden of years, of old betrayals, of guilt and pride began to dissipate. He, who had lived in shadows, found himself before the woman who had taught him to perceive the light, to merit it. He wore a silver-grey frock coat, his cravat secured by a discreet pearl. Eleanor reached him, and without curtsies, without a bowed head, she simply smiled, a gesture that sufficed to silence the entire world. The clergyman uttered brief words. The vow was sincere. As they exchanged rings, their fingers brushed, a gentle touch affirming, "True love does not spring from impulse, but from waiting." There was no applause, but sighs, discreet, restrained tears, even from her sisters. They finally understood that Eleanor had never been a shadow, but the very light that had chosen not to display itself. The garden welcomed them after the ceremony. The sun descended, painting the sky with gold and orange. Hands united, words were unnecessary. The silence, once an abyss of absences, was now a sanctuary. Eleanor watched the horizon, her ivory gown dancing in the wind, the camellias in her hair exhaling a gentle fragrance. Sebastian gazed at her, a silent respect, a care manifest in small gestures, brushing aside a branch, offering his arm, softening his voice. Small acts, more eloquent than any grandeur. At night, dinner unfolded beneath a pergola adorned with ivy and glass lanterns. The simple table revealed Eleanor's touch, porcelain inherited from Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, embroidered napkins, flowers chosen for their perfume, not their price. True elegance resided in affection, in complicit glances. Sebastian raised his glass. Before the few guests, friends, sisters, the chaplain, his gaze overflowed with emotion and firmness. "Tonight," he began with a serene voice, "I celebrate neither titles nor lineages. I celebrate what this woman has taught me." Eleanor never needed a name to be magnificent. She always was, even when the world refused to see her. He paused, the announcement suspended in the air. Eleanor looked at him, surprised. "Her book," Sebastian continued, "the book she wrote with such silence and courage will be published, and it will not bear my name. It will bear hers. For every word was born of who she is, and I would be a thief to claim merit for something only her heart could have created." A murmur swept through the table. The sisters exchanged glances, some with tears. Genevieve Blackwood in particular smiled, emotion close to the surface. Eleanor lowered her gaze, touching the napkin. She had not expected it. Neither his recognition nor the world's. For years, writing had been her sanctuary, her way of existing without being noticed. Now the pages she had imagined eternally hidden would gain a voice. Eleanor Blackwood rose, her eyes lightly moist, reflecting the flickering lantern lights, the echo of a recent confrontation with Mrs. Victoria Blackwood still vibrating in her soul. It had been a silent yet fierce battle, where Eleanor, for the first time, had raised her voice, reclaiming her right to her own story. "When I began to write," she uttered, her voice serene yet firm, a newfound resilience discernible in each syllable, "it was merely an endeavor to endure the silence imposed upon me. I never imagined anyone would read, much less comprehend. But if these words are published today, let them serve all women who, like me, learned to exist in the shadows, to remind them invisibility is merely a pause, never an end." Sebastian Vance rose, extending his hand without words. Eleanor accepted it, a simple gesture that spoke more eloquently than any discourse. As the servants poured wine and the candles cast a golden glow upon moved faces, the distant melody of a guitar mingled with the nightly chorus of crickets in the Hudson Valley. The evening flowed in serene anticipation. Later, after all had retired, Eleanor walked to the lake. The silver moon danced upon the water. Sebastian followed her, silent, and they stood side by side, contemplating the shimmering mirror of the surface. He touched her hand lightly. "The world may not understand," he murmured, the memory of his brother's betrayal and loss a persistent burden, "but I do." Eleanor smiled with an almost childlike sweetness. "The world never understood what it truly means to love," she replied. Sebastian observed her, as if imprinting that moment into his memory. The woman who had lain forgotten amidst family portraits now embodied freedom. She had not needed to mold herself. It sufficed to be who she had always been. That night, beneath the starlit Hudson Valley sky, the magnate and the woman no one expected discovered that true greatness lay not in titles, but in the honor one bestows upon one's own name. And her name, Eleanor Blackwood, writer, wife, voice, choice, would echo beyond the drawing rooms and whispers. Destiny, at last, had chosen to listen to her. Time glided softly, like the leaves falling in autumn. The estate where Eleanor had once been silenced transformed into a refuge for voices once stifled. The walls retained their hue, yet their interior was a new world, built by hands once unseen that now wrote, embroidered, planted, and taught. It was late afternoon when Eleanor descended the veranda steps, her notebook clutched in her fingers. Her hair, once rigidly confined, now danced in a loose chignon, adorned by an ivory camellia brooch. The pale blue gown was simple, yet the embroidery on its sleeves, crafted by one of the sheltered ladies, elevated it to a silent work of art. Her eyes, which had learned to perceive the world with lucidity and gentleness, now shone with the brilliance of one who had conquered battles untold. In the main drawing room, now a vibrant library, women of all ages gathered around a large table. Some with white hair and hands marked by time, others too young for the burden of abandonment. All, however, shared a past of silence, ignorance and devaluation until they crossed the gates of Eleanor's estate. "Today, we shall review the concluding chapters," she said, her voice firm and tender. Beside her, upon the table, rested a volume bound in ecru linen, Eleanor's third book newly published. The title, hand-stitched on its cover, read, "The Unheard Ones." News of its release spread slowly, not with aristocratic applause or elite reviews, but with something more lasting: the quiet recognition of hundreds of women in villages and cities who felt seen for the first time. The author sought not fame, she longed for permanence. As she spoke, a soft rustle of footsteps echoed in the corridor. A resigned quietude settled as Beatrix, Eleanor's sister, drew near. Widowed, her gaze, once haughty, now carried the humility of one who had traversed personal torment. The women made space. "May I sit?" Beatrix hesitated. Eleanor smiled, a gesture of acceptance needing no words, and pulled the chair. Within the formal garden of Blackwood Manor, visible from the grand window, a separate world bloomed. Ladies stitched, gathered herbs. And Clara, a girl of 12, read aloud beneath the apple tree. Her chestnut hair in long braids framed a steady, melodious voice, reading Eleanor's first book. The worn cover was a reliquary of time and use. "I learned to remember because I was forgotten," Clara intoned. "Those who erased me did not expect I would learn to write. Those who concealed me did not foresee that silence would become my finest ink." The voice stilled the garden. Even the rustle of leaves ceased, nature held in rapt listening. Eleanor, stirred by an intrinsic strength, rose. Her heart constricted with the profound beauty of a simple, timeless moment. She walked, drawn by a dark, solitary blossom near the apple tree. A black camellia, resolute, asserted itself there. A work of the wind, of fate. Eleanor knelt, touching delicate petals that contrasted sharply with their intense hue. Black as a starless night, yet vibrant, a heart refusing to be stilled. "You have bloomed," Eleanor whispered, her voice resonating with triumph. "Amongst myriad colors, you chose to exist as you are. This suffices." Her whisper carried the resilience of one who had risen, the subtle rebellion against all that had sought to silence her. Sebastian Vance, observing her inquietude, drew near. His silvering hair and dark linen coat blended seamlessly. His eyes, once watchful, now contemplated rather than merely observed. A witness to Eleanor's reconstruction, perhaps a part of it. He no longer sought to be a hero. His past traumas, betrayal and loss were distant shadows, vanquished by the tranquility of the present. He extended his hand. Eleanor accepted it, their hands intertwining like branches that, after divergent paths, finally meet. "You have written the world, Eleanor," Sebastian murmured, his voice low and wise. "And does the world now write you back?" Eleanor smiled, not with euphoria, but with the serenity of one who had come to understand. "What we write today, Sebastian, is not to be remembered ourselves, but so that others may never again be forgotten." Behind them, Clara resumed her reading. Eleanor's words resonated like ancestral hymns, of all the women, nameless, homeless, voiceless, including those who had sought to silence her, such as Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, whose influence was now a distant, overcome echo. In the author's ledger, a line awaited: "What blossoms in secret is also a flower." The black camellia remained solitary, whole, as Eleanor's story reached its climax. Once silenced, she was the world's voice. Each woman who crossed the gates of her home in the Hudson Valley and Newport found solace, reflection, paper, and the courage to tell her own truth. Time, a delicate quill upon pages already written, had molded Eleanor. At 49, her presence radiated the serenity of one who had weathered storms and cultivated blossoms. Her wrinkles, more than age, were memories of days when she had been invisible and later immense. Her hair, once bound, now danced in subtle waves with the breeze from the camellia garden, where the past at last had come to rest. There she received readers, students, daughters of other eras, seeking the courage that Eleanor, with her silent rebellion, dared to find. The book, Chronicles of a Silent Voice, was a sanctuary. Within its pages, stories of women who had never graced newspaper covers, yet who had fought epic battles, came to life. Sebastian Vance, silent guardian of this space, understood the profound depth of those narratives. He himself carried scars, the betrayal of his mentor, the tragic loss of his brother. These past pains rendered him an essential accomplice, one who forged paths for Eleanor Blackwood to flourish, never seeking prominence, but a haven for forgotten voices. Eleanor, for her part, had not been born submissive. From an early age, Mrs. Victoria Blackwood's expectations suffocated, yet a flame of rebellion burned within her. "Mother, my words deserve to exist," she had dared to declare in a confrontation that shattered years of silence. It was there, in that direct challenge, that the seed of her chronicles was planted. Sebastian suggested the main parlour be transformed into a library, a place where evenings in the Hudson Valley would be dedicated to reading. Together, Eleanor and Sebastian had Clara, a name that was no mere happenstance. Clara, as clear as her mother's gaze upon new beginnings. She grew amidst books, surrounded by questions and dignity. When she learned to read, her first request was the manuscript her mother had penned. Reading, the girl's eyes welled, understanding the journey. Years later, Beatrix, the sister who once seemed indifferent, sought refuge. Following her husband's passing, she arrived at Blackwood Manor in the Hudson Valley, carrying a single valise and an exhausted gaze. Eleanor welcomed her, no questions posed. "You have always held a place here, Beatrix. You simply did not realize it. Within those walls, women were not to be defined by their missteps, but by the resolute strides taken thereafter." Arthur Sterling, the man from Eleanor's past, never returned, nor did he ever write. It became known through whispers and distant acquaintances that he concluded his days in an empty manor on Long Island, surrounded by portraits and silences. His absence, with an ironic grace, bestowed a lesson that required no vengeance. Eleanor learned that to forgive at times is simply to choose not to bear the burden of lingering resentment. Society within the Hudson Valley, slowly yet perceptibly, began its transformation. Young women who once dreamt solely of grand balls now set their sights upon publishing houses. Ladies, previously mere surnames in the social registry, found recognition through their own articulated words. The Manor's library expanded, seamlessly merging into a small literary institute, sustained and guided by women of every age. One afternoon, beneath the venerable fig tree, a group of young women gathered for an intimate discussion. Eleanor read passages from her chronicles, while Sebastian, with tranquil hands, served tea. A young woman, her countenance restless and her eyes alight with dreams, tentatively raised her hand. "Mrs. Blackwood, does love truly wait?" Eleanor gently lowered her book, took a measured breath, and sought Sebastian's gaze, who observed her from a distance with the same unwavering, silent reverence. She then turned to the young woman, a sweet smile gracing her lips. "Love does not delay its arrival. It merely awaits our readiness to truly be seen." In the deeper reaches of the garden, a newly planted bloom commanded attention, a black camellia of an improbable hue. It was not there by mere chance. It stood as a symbol of beauty that does not demand clamor, of courage that seeks no applause, of the woman once overlooked who, by virtue of that neglect, learned to remember. Eleanor rose, extended her hand to her daughter Clara, and walked among the myriad voices that, like her own, had once been silenced. Thus, with steadfast steps upon the very earth she herself had rendered fertile, concluded a narrative penned with sorrow, with tenderness, and with profound liberty. Eleanor's story reminds us that true affection is not that which arrives first, but that which endures. She demonstrated that even the most forgotten woman may, in time, author her own destiny and transmute silence into strength, anguish into creation, and oversight into an indelible legacy. May this chronicle be shared with any who find themselves in need of remembering their intrinsic worth. For indeed, a well-told tale possesses the power to mend that which time has left unclosed. Yet, one must not depart so swiftly. Further narratives, crafted with profound intensity, stirring emotion and abundant soul, await exploration. Such companionship is deeply valued. Within these chronicles of the American Gilded Age, love invariably endures, and each woman, in her own right, authors her unique and lasting legacy.